230th meeting of the Equal Employment Practices Commission. Time is 9:42 on Thursday, March 5th. Item number 2, approval of minutes. Can I get a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
A second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Great. Item number 3, new business. Item A, the EEPC's annual report. Congrats to the staff for completing a very monster size EEPC annual report of all the tremendous work
Could take me
in
all year to read it.
2019.
I want to
Are there any
commend,
highlights you'd like to share?
I want to commend all of your staff
Yes,
on an incredible job. So,
unbelievable.
once more, because what it does is shows the incredible job you've done all year. So cheers to all of you.
I second that, it's fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything to point out or
Uh,
highlights of note?
There is one highlight.
I mean, the biggest highlight is that we completed, what was it, 44 final determinations? Or determinations of compliance.
Is that our largest number ever?
I think we were it's a tie. Jen doesn't like this. She wanted to say it was
One
the
other
largest.
year,
It was in
dear.
2012,
Before
I think.
you were in charge,
Yes.
I take it.
I
It
was
was-
a
Well,
little
you'll
salty
need it.
about that.
You will beat it next year, I am sure. Now
However,
that the stakes are so high.
however, we did start 48 audits last year, and I think it was a tremendous accomplishment. So that's our biggest takeaway.
We started
Fantastic.
we initiated 48 audits in 2019, and by the end of 2019, we had 44 of them either finished with compliance or in compliance monitoring,
Yeah.
so.
We never do a press release around it, right?
Around the release? Yeah,
No.
We do.
We could,
But I was just gonna say we can.
why don't
I
you
mean, I
do
can
one
look
with
into it.
with the annual report? So the press release has the annual report, which is available to the public, as well as highlighting that for the second time in our history, we have completed 44.
Is that something that the team would have capacity to do?
Yeah, I'm gonna check into it, I'll see.
Yeah. And
But
maybe with like
it's
quotes
both
from
the annual report.
commissioners and, yeah, just to uplift the work of the staff, at least to have a
Okay.
thing to go back to. Great. Okay, congrats to the team. Item number B, under new business, is, meeting with the city council chairperson of the Committee on Civil and Human Rights regarding the EEPC's needs for local law 13 resources. So as folks may know, we're in preliminary budget season. The council's preliminary budget hearing on issues pertaining to the EEPC is on Monday, March 23rd, and, Sharice, Jen, this meeting?
If you'd like me to,
No, it was just a question and a point of information. Sharice and I are meeting with, Councilmember Matthew Eugene, whose committee has oversight over these particular issues pertaining to the commission. That meeting is happening right after our conversation today. The executive director and team have prepared a very helpful, summary of, charter compliance and local law 13 implementation, which summarizes at a high level, but also sort of broad enough, the issues pertaining to the breadth of the work of the EPC, local law 13 and its implications, and, adjoining that, budget concerns that we have around continuing to invest in the great work of this team.
Well, then you absolutely need to hire someone who's an economist that can deal with it. 'Cause
Right.
I mean, you
It's
can't do
explicitly
it without
outlined,
it.
yeah, it's explicitly outlined
So,
in the deck,
um,
around needs.
So I'll just briefly show that the EPC, this is sort of like our goals, right? We're here, this is the compliance continuum, we call it. For our charter mandates, which are the audits, and then the local law mandates, like local law 13 and some other local laws. So here we've been able to do our simple and transactional work, that's conducting the audits, making sure that, the audits have merit, looking at the merit of the entity's policies and procedures, et cetera. Which is what we've been doing pretty much since the EPC's inception. we were able to get to level 2 where we developed templates, uniform standards, electronic data collection, and then a research unit so that we can take a broad look at what we've done in the audits and make citywide,
Suggestions, recommendations.
have a
Yeah.
citywide synopsis sort of what is going on. We're still at this level. We want to get to the level where we can do some predictions and we have done some prescriptive analytics because our recommendations, we prescribe corrective action. But we want to get to the point where we can look at trends and use them to make targeted recommendations about underutilization, adverse impact, occupational segregation, pay equity, and all of those things that impact the city's workforce. So that's where we wanna get to. We're still kind of at level 3, and that's why we need more stuff. And then I go into describing what local law 13 specifically requests in terms of predicting and prescribing analytics, customizing reports, because we have to produce reports that the public can understand, or the mayor or the city council, and that's different from what we have done in the past, which is just to present a preliminary or final determination. So we're kind of like in the middle here, where we're on the cusp, I guess, of the predictive prescriptive, but that's where to optimize where the EPC is going and to optimize the agency, its vision, and everything that the charter intends for the EPC, we have to get to the end of the spectrum, which is the predictive and prescriptive analytics. We have to quantify data. We have to collect large amounts of data and quantify it and actually paint a complete picture using the qualitative data that we collect, and the quantitative data, which is the data that Local Law 13 has asked the Mayor's Office of Data Analytics to give to the EPC, seeds data, the quantitative data that we get that says what types of people are employed with the city. We look at the level of effort, and then if we compare the quantitative and the qualitative data, we can make prescriptive recommendations to say how they can change policies to impact diversity.
Can
or
I
to
translate it into
the
my
numbers.
simple brain?
Yes.
Okay, so currently, when we look at the city council for one of another one, we look at who's employed, in what jobs they're employed, and what they're paid, and whether or not they are, let's say we look at promotion. What this has you look at is the world and how many people are without looking at the city council, but look at the entire city as to who's employed, what skill sets they have, and how they might be employed within the city council? Is that what this does for us?
I don't know.
What this is getting at is, a lot of the data that we have is qualitative. So we're
Yes.
talking about agencies' efforts
Right,
towards
Yeah,
right,
employing.
right.
The quantitative is, well, how were you able to impact the number of people that were employed, right? So when we start looking at what you've done and what
It's
you
available.
yielded, what number your efforts yielded, then we start to see, okay, are your efforts really working? But when we look at it citywide and we say there's a trend here for this title, most agencies are taking this level of effort, but this is the yield. So we're getting into actually saying, this is what's happening, and what are we gonna do about it? How can we affect those numbers? But it's painting a picture that centers around data rather than just, I guess, theory.
Yeah, or even self-reported, certainly, of course,
Right.
agencies are reporting on their own as to their individual efforts rather
Right.
than looking at the data in the aggregate.
And if we're looking at the data in aggregate also, so that's why the next step is to look for staff to feed this progression that we wanna get to. But the next step would be looking at the labor market, which I think is what you're trying to say.
That's where that's where I'm
To
coming
say,
from.
where are the people? And is it practical that we have an expectation that they be in the workforce? So that's in the city's workforce. So that's what underutilization, adverse impact,
Well, back to one.
occupational
Back
segregation.
to one we know of, so there aren't enough minority architects. Ergo, it is very difficult for city planning to employ minority architects, because the world doesn't have a whole lot of them within within New York City.
True. So when we look,
So then what effort do you have to do to get more architects, or women who paint bridges? I mean, there are places that we, without having anything more, we know going in are areas where there is not the kind of diversity you might wanna have. So,
well, it will tell,
it'll tell you
Yeah,
that, it'll just reinforce
it
our
will tell you
knowledge of
whether or
local
not there's
editors.
underutilization. So you may have occupational segregation, cause you may have a steering of certain races or genders into certain titles.
Right,
But because they don't have degrees in those titles, there's no underutilization. Because there are not qualified people in the
Sure.
workforce that can,
right.
that you can recruit from, right? So all of these things will sort of drill down and say exactly what is a practical recommendation for this. If there's no, what did you say, architects in the workforce with the skills, then logically they wouldn't be in the
Title.
in the private workforce, they wouldn't be in the city's workforce, right? So that's what we want to be able to do, that level of analysis, pretty much. And that's predictive and then prescriptive, okay, so what can you do about it? So, I kinda did a timeline of the audit cycle. We're on track at this point, even though we had some delays earlier this year with the surveys. But this is with 6 program analysts. We are swamped in terms of the audits. And we have to usually we strive to get all of the audits, at least the preliminary determinations, done by June, so that we can, the agencies can go into compliance monitoring by July and be completed probably around November, December.
So rather than doing it on a rotation, which you've done in prior years, you're doing it starting January 1, or starting the first quarter, you're trying to get them all out.
Right.
Got it.
So here's how we believe we can get to the other side of that
Right.
bridge that we're trying to climb. We can get up the hill. I think we can hire a data scientist or a labor economist. I mean, and a labor economist.
You're not
In
asking.
order to address our local law 13 mandate and still have the staff that we have work on the audits. I believe that can get us to the end of where we would like to go.
Time out. If I were to ask you whether you could address and take some of your current staff and have them do this other labor, what would your answer be?
No,
They're
Given
very
all the breadth of
specialized.
the work
Yeah.
that they're
No,
doing.
no,
on
I mean, you
audits.
could delay making a mandate and redress. Do you have, the no is because we don't have people with the skills, right?
right, that's one. And two, well, if we had people with the skills, yes, we would do some cross-training or some cross-work.
But you currently don't have people with
But
the
no,
skills.
we don't have that level of expertise in the
That's,
EPC
I
at
would
this
like
time.
that answer, that's
Yes.
why I want to ask the question. Thank you very much.
Right, so on January 11th of 2019, we had, that's when the law came into effect. It seems like we had 24 months, right? But we actually have 9 months because we don't get the pay equity data until May.
Does that mean that
2020.
you'd like an extension in the legislation now?
Well, even if we have an extension, we need staff.
No. Two separate questions. I know you need staff, but you also, right now, need an extension in the legislation, but you can't make the mandate because of the availability issue. If you had the staff today, you still couldn't make it.
We don't know that, let's
Yeah.
go to the next slide.
We should finish
Yeah.
most of this, cause it might,
Yeah.
our questions might be.
Right.
addressed.
And we replaced the director of research. We asked for the hire of a statistician, approval was denied, and for the labor economist. Now, the alternative is we can get a tool, like we did teammate. So, what's option two? More resources, rather than more staff. We can get a tool like Data Robot or other, which can, it's a one-time investment with minimal annual costs for licenses or upgrades after that, but it identifies solutions, it processes data, it includes all of the data, and we can put data in there, or it can draw from data, and it can help us to do some of the data analysis portion of what the statistician or the labor economist may be doing. And then we can get a consultant, which is a temporary cost, and this person can help for a certain amount of time to get the platform in place. And then we can move on for the 10 years that we have to do local law 13. So those are the options. How much this will cost? I kind of had a brief conversation with a consultant that said that based on the framework that I presented, it could be around $64,000. I don't know how much Data Robot is. We have 2 employees that actually attended a Data Robot conference today. They're there right now and may bring back some costs. And even if we don't get Data Robot, we'll have some idea of what other tools we can use to address our need.
Sorry, if you were to use Data Robot, your existing staff could use it, or if you get Data Robot, you would still need to hire somebody? Like, so is it user friendly for the staff that you currently have?
We don't know yet.
Okay.
Got it.
Probably
That's
the
why they're at the,
Right.
I would
also-
remind everybody that it took you over a year to implement the last data
yes,
update, so that your time issue
And actually
continues to
took
be a time
years.
issue.
yeah, 2 or 3 years. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
Okay,
long
so your time issue continues to be a time issue. So I go back and ask my question again. Seems to me one of the other things you may be asking for is, whichever we do, we need an extension of the time, because we can't possibly do what you require us to do from 6 months from when the data becomes available. You know that now. You know that now.
I would prefer to say that we need the staff and we're gonna try our best to do it,
I think that's fair.
yeah. Because,
What is the problem? Okay, so what happens if you try the best to do it and you miss the date? Then what?
well, I think what would happen is we will try our best and it may compromise the quality of the product. And we can say, given the time constraints, that we endeavored to do some other thing but couldn't complete it because of, like I said, the time constraints. I would prefer not to delay the date. If I have to, if we have to, and the commission decides, then yeah, we can.
My recommendation also is that if the deadline is, as the deadline's nearing, that we could make a determination as to if there's, rather than extending the legislation, putting forth a letter signed by all of
Asking
us,
for an extension.
acknowledging the shortened time frame, giving a more realistic time frame, and just, that's a fairly common
Right.
practice that a lot of city agencies go through when they're legislated to produce some sort of a report, and don't meet that deadline, where they give notice, particularly to the council, that this is
Okay.
the new date, and so I'd like to consider that together as we have a more realistic picture, if that makes sense. So a version of this we will share during today's meeting. Thank you for this. This is super helpful. It's a visual version. Are there any other items to discuss related to new business, either items A or B?
No.
Great. Okay, let's move on to item number 4, audit update. Status of sexual harassment prevention and response practices audits.
Okay, so, we completed 34 of the 48, we had 48 agencies on the 2019 audit plan. We issued 34 determinations of compliance or non-compliance slash, for those agencies. We had some overlap from the previous year, so we were still able to do 44 agencies last year, but we're still completing agencies from the 40 that we started in 2019. So, with that, we also commenced 34 agencies in 2020. Which I think puts us on track regardless to complete, you know, a similar number to what we completed last year.
Except that
this
she's
year.
got a best last year. So you
So
better
you only have to
get-
do
she's
like
gotta
one
look at-
more.
She's gotta do
One
one
more.
or two more,
I
there's
have
no
to
question
burn
in
the
my
midnight oil.
mind. There's no question in my mind that she's gotta find somebody.
We're gonna
Whether
make
it's a
it happen.
community board that didn't know was going back
Right.
in, or,
We're gonna make it
or a
happen.
district attorney that
Right.
we're gonna look at again.
Right.
Someone is bound to make her number.
Yes,
Right.
that's the goal, ultimately.
So for
Got it.
2020, of the 2020 audits that we started, I think Jen told me that we had some delays with the agencies, submitting the surveys because we have to go through some additional vetting, I guess, after Mohini left to try to figure out access to, SurveyMonkey. But anyway, it delayed processes a little bit. But we were able to, I think there's 2 PDs at this time that's completed, and the co-managers are, reviewing them. So the employees are just working and completing PDs. We also hired, another analyst, who will introduce the commission to after the meeting, and we're hiring another analyst next week.
So what,
Or,
what's your number up
next
to,
week,
6?
yeah.
You're back to 6?
Yeah.
6.
I think this might be the most that we've had.
Any other questions about the status update?
Nothing more for the meeting.
Item 5, compliance update. A, status of 2019 audit plan compliance monitoring.
Well, to piggyback off of what Sheree said, we initiated 48 audits in 2019. We have only 9 left in compliance monitoring. 5 agencies have not yet been issued a determination of compliance, but it's only because they just haven't done the final action memo yet. They just recently completed all of their corrective actions, and so they're kind of in that limbo. I anticipate you'll have at least 5, if not more, compliance resolutions next month once those agencies wrap it up. So we only have 9 agencies out of the 48 that are still in compliance monitoring. We're working with them closely. The agencies, for the most part, seem cooperative, and I anticipate that we will definitely finish in the next month or 2, give or take.
Any questions? Bless you.
The 9 includes the city council or does not?
Does not include the city council.
Great. Item B, city council compliance monitoring. Extension request.
So, as we are all aware, the New York City Council underwent an audit. Their original compliance monitoring period ended on January 31st. They requested an extension. We granted one until February 21st. That extension has since expired, so their compliance monitoring period is over. They submitted another letter the day of their compliance monitoring ended, which is February 21st, requesting, I guess, additional time to submit documentation. They have been submitting documentation and things in Team Central since February 21st up until yesterday, which in good faith we have been reviewing and accepting to give them as much credit as we can possibly give them. If the commission votes to not provide an extension, I have prepared a compliance resolution for a determination of non-compliance based upon their current status, which is 7 of 29 corrective actions have been implemented, which leaves 22 unimplemented.
I move that we do not grant the extension.
Wow.
Is there a second?
A second.
All in favor?
Really? Okay, yes.
Aye,
And note for the record that I'm abstaining from the vote.
yes. We are
Any
aware.
objections? Great. So,
Wow,
the commission has determined to not grant the
right.
extension request that we received from the council.
Okay, just, to read a part of the, did you tell them that we're coming back in 1 year? Did you mention that?
Oh, I did not.
Okay, so a part of the resolution is that the EPC is saying that we will initiate a follow-up audit within 1 year to assess the city council's implementation of the assigned corrective actions pertaining to its sexual harassment prevention and response practices. Is commission okay with that?
Yes.
Great.
Okay.
So the second item, resolution number 2019 AP
Do you
238
want us to sign it?
102
Where were you?
2020.
You're signing
Sorry, we
this
have to do a
letter.
second vote on the resolution itself, correct?
Yes.
The first is just for
I move
extension
that
request.
we, approve the resolution as drafted by the staff of the EEPC.
I agree.
Great, all in favor?
Aye.
I'm abstained, and any objections? Great. Okay, the resolution passes. Thank you for your work,
Thank you.
all of the back and forth. Very glad to see that there is a moment to return to this. I
will sign this.
Are there any other issues or
Commissioner
items?
I have a question.
Question.
Where are we on planning a new conference? I'm
Being
sorry.
Being that we're trying to figure out local law 13.
Did I have to sign that?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
sorry.
Thank you.
That's a great question, Commissioner.
I'm sorry. I just, well, the problem is that in order for us to be appreciated for what we do, we need to be somewhat more
Yes.
public. And the conferences have been the way that you have made us more public. Both within the HR community, but beyond that. And, they require a lot of thinking, they require a lot of preparation, and I'm not making light of either of that. I'm just asking as to where it is in the priorities.
So I think given where the team is,
Do I need to send out a letter?
given where the members of the team, the EPC are, I think it might be upon us as commissioners to maybe at a different moment convene and think through how we might map out a plan around a conference. I know that the team's at capacity, and perhaps we can help to shape or provide a framework around what might be possible, and really think about the resources that would be required to pull something off that feels like it's.
I think we've done that, actually. I'll go back and look at the minutes, but I think we've come up with suggestions as to what the next steps might be.
So is that something that we as commissioners can commit to doing? I know Arba's obviously not in the room, but is that something that we might?
Yeah, can I just say, I think it's a good idea, I totally think like the last public hearing was fantastic, but I do think you're facing this local law 13, which is a lot of work, and I feels like by the next commission meeting, you'll have more information about some of this stuff, and I just think like maybe we sort of, maybe for the next meeting, we can pull together what are the steps that we need to take, what do you think as staff is a logical timeline for something like
Yes.
this?
Yeah.
Leave alone like, this is a great idea and all of that, we know all the good reasons for doing it, but realistically, what is a timeline? If it's later this year, that's fine, if it's early next year, that's fine, whatever it is, I think we should follow
Yeah.
your direction around it. It is labor intensive.
I think, I can promise that I'll try my best to do something either late this year or early next year. I'm gonna try my best. The staff that would be working on local law 13 will be working on the hearing. But I discussed it, maybe maybe a way to marry the issues in local laws or.
The team, yeah, I think so.
So,
But we were waiting to receive the data from the city.
yes,
For the May deadline.
so let me put together some sort of like, maybe a rudimentary, outline of what we can do, or what issues we can kinda hone in on for a public hearing that still feed local law
That's
13.
right,
And it may be after we get a closer look at
We're actually having.
see what you have, but
So-
I'm not asking you for an answer now, I'm just saying, let's not lose sight
Right.
Right.
the fact that that's also one of our, you should excuse the expression, requirements under our charter, and it's a piece that we ought to be, not lose sight of.
So it sounds like perhaps for the April meeting, perhaps as part of the agenda, we can commit some time to some formal discussion around what it would take.
Right.
Following Molly's summary of sort of the type of discussion to have at this juncture, and that there's a bunch of data coming in May, but we can commit some time to talking about it as part of this meeting in April. Does that work?
I'll include on the agenda.
Cool, great, thanks, Jen.
impetus for more stuff.
Are there any other issues before we adjourn?
No, I move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.